Hello friends, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Danny and today I'm going to give you guys some spooky recommendations. Halloween is right around the corner, so whether or not you guys want a cozy book to curl up on the actual night or if you just want some autumnal reads because you're not ready to let spooky season pass you by, that's what I'm here for. So I have two different categories of books for you guys today. I have a horror category for those of you who like the scarier reads. The second category is more miscellaneous. It's fantasy horror, and there's even one fantasy romance. So just something that has more subtle spooky vibes that still very much fit in the fall season. So hopefully you'll find something here that you can enjoy. All of these books that I'm giving are 4 stars or higher. I'll tell you guys what my ratings were as we go through them, but they are all books that I have really enjoyed reading. Some of them are on or going to be on my top books of the year list, so hopefully you'll find something that piques your interest. We will start with the horror category and I will go from my lowest rated to my top rated. So my lowest rated in this category is Into the Drowning Deep, which is a 4.25. So pretty good rating for the lowest book that I'm going to talk about. This is a sci-fi, well, is it considered sci-fi horror? I think it's fantasy horror because it's mermaids, but I think it's categorized as sci-fi, but whatever. There is a lot of science involved. This is a horror story focusing on the study of mermaids. So we know as the reader that there was a ship that was sent off to the Mariana Trench 7 years ago, I think, and it never came back. There has been some footage from that ship that has gotten out into the interwebs, and it's a bloody mess, quite literally, that people have been speculating about for the past 7 years that mermaids exist and this company is trying to hide it. Well, we are following a multitude of characters. I would say the main character is the sister of one of the people who was on the original voyage. And we get to see the process and the voyage of the second ship that is sent to the Mariana Trench by the same company that lost the first ship. And so they've made some changes. There are some scientists involved in this go around as far as the second voyage goes. They've put some security measures into place, but as they have shipped out and continue out to sea, you see that those safety measures and all of the brain power that they have on the ship might not be enough to keep everybody safe. The science in this is absolutely phenomenal. I love the deep dive into the logistics of how things would work and some misunderstandings that humans have because of local legends and lore, and I thought all of that was very fascinating, and this book does not hold back on gore and death. It's very dark and wild, and I really enjoyed it. I had a really good time. I think one of the criticisms I've heard about this book is that it's slow, and it is a long book, and I think that it worked for me because there were so many facets of things that we were learning. You have the science, but you also have the intrigue behind all of the different characters that you have. You have your main character that you're following who has been studying marine life because of the disappearance of her sister on the ship, but you also have some wildlife hunters that have been hired. You have a couple of scientists who literally have studied mermaids their entire existence, and so they've been brought on board for their expertise. You have a couple of individuals who have been studying sonar as well. You have a couple of twins and their sister who serves as an interpreter because they are deaf, and that linguistically comes into play. There are a lot of different parts, a lot of moving pieces to make this story work, and I thought it was phenomenal. Next is a book I am hesitant to recommend to everybody, but I do have to put it in this video because if it sounds like something you would enjoy and you can get past maybe the plot being a little not as polished or refined as some other books, I think The Library at Hellbore was a really fun time. I rated this a 4.5 star. This is by Cassandra Khaw, and it focuses on a university where all of these apocalyptic beings are brought to. Some of them they come themselves, and then others, they have been kidnapped and forcefully put into this university that is supposed to make them quote unquote normal by graduation day. However, you find out that on graduation day, bad things ensue. The university's headmasters actually have much more sinister plans for their student body, and you are living with the students as these things unfold. There are two timelines in this. One of them is 6 days prior to graduation, and you get to see the lead up, and then one of them is graduation and beyond, where you get to see what happens afterwards. This is super gory. There's a lot of body horror in this, so if you are squeamish in that regard, I would say definitely pass on this one. But I think that the study of these creatures who are in this university, like the past timeline as far as what they were learning in some of their classes, is absolutely atrocious, and how especially one of the characters is treated is really horrible. And so it's definitely not a pleasant academic experience for these creatures. And the deaths that occur in this are wild and very creative when it comes to the types of apocalyptic creatures that could exist and some lore that is out there. I found this very fun, and there's never a dull moment. It's a pretty small book, and there's never not something happening on page that you're like, what's going on? Like trying to peek, behind your hiding place. I found this to be a lot of fun. I do think that some criticism of this is going to be that the plot is a little messy at times. Sometimes it feels like the dual timeline isn't needed, and I'm still a little confused as to what happened in the end, but I didn't care at the end. I think that this will be something that I have fun rereading and seeing if I can catch little breadcrumbs that I didn't catch the first time around. So I would recommend, if you're in for a wild and really gory time and you don't necessarily care if the story wraps up in a nice little bow. Next is one of my favorites from last spooky season, and that is My Darling Dreadful Thing. I absolutely love this book. It's a 5-star read. Unfortunately, I haven't heard very many people talk about it this year. It had a lot of buzz around it last year, but it's kind of died down, and I don't think that it should, because it is absolutely phenomenal. It is very slow in plotting. It's beautifully written, and at its heart, it's a love story, which I think the author even mentions in the author's note in the beginning. It has mixed media in it. It has so many things going for it for me. It is a gothic story as well, which I know doesn't work for everybody. It doesn't work for me a lot of times, but for whatever reason, this one worked. And if you haven't heard of it, you are following our main character, whose name is Ruse. Ruse has a really horrible childhood. She is neglected by her mother and essentially forced into pretending to be a medium for these people who come to town for her mother to make money. And she, in this process of pretending to be a medium, she meets a spirit named Ruth. And her and Ruth become friends, and you get to see this relationship form that you're not quite sure is a good relationship, a bad relationship. There's definitely some give and take for everything that happens between these two characters, but it does give Ruse a friend in this really horrible time in her life. So it follows that relationship, but it also later in the story, a little bit later in the story, you meet a woman named Agnes, who is a woman who comes into Ruth's mother's shop to receive some information about her fiance. And Ruse ends up striking up a friendship with this woman. Inevitably, Ruse is able to leave the situation that she's in, and Agnes helps with that. And you get to see the relationship between Agnes and Ruse grow throughout the story as well. You also know at the very beginning of this book that there is something going on. Something bad has happened, and Ruse is in a psychiatric facility, and she is being tested to see if she is able to stand trial for something that has happened, and a psychiatrist is interviewing her. So you get these little snippets of the interviews that this psychiatrist is having with Ruse. It's eerie, creepy, dark, beautiful. I love this book. I know it's not going to be for everybody because of how slow-paced it is, but if you are someone who likes a plotting story, I would say give this one a try. Last on my horror recommendations is the book that I think is going to be on my favorites list of the year. This year, we'll see. We still have a couple of months to go, but I think it's pretty high up there, and that is Greenview's Burning. This was a recommendation by Leandra last year, and I just never got around to it, so I decided to read it this year. And oh my God, this book is beautifully written. It has the most amazing language. It completely immerses you in the story. And it's about art as well, which I love the mix of art and horror. It is something that I really, really enjoy reading. And it also pairs that with grief, which is another thing that I do like when horror can dive into someone's psyche and someone grieving one of their loved ones. It's something that I enjoy reading about. So as long as it's done well, which I think you can say about a lot of stories. If you haven't heard of Green Fuse Burning, you are following our main character, whose name I can't remember, but she is an artist. She has recently lost her father and has since become very depressed and doesn't really know where her direction is in life. You learn about her and her girlfriend's relationship and how it has been in the past, how it is now, the fact that she is struggling with the life that she has and knowing that she should be happy, but she doesn't feel happy, and it's just a lot of emotion that she's dealing with. She ends up getting a grant from a university, I think, to study a project that she has put forth. Actually, her girlfriend put it forth for her. She wasn't quite ready to dive into it yet, but her girlfriend thinks that it's a good idea. And she decides to take it and go out to this really isolated cabin and make this artwork. You are following kind of a storyline where you're not quite sure what happened. You know that some of her artwork made it out because they are presenting this artwork. So the beginning of every chapter is a snippet of some art that this person has made during this isolated trip out to this cabin to do this artwork for the grant. But there's some ominous tones of something happened out in this isolated location. The descriptions of the artwork in this book make me want someone out there who is more creative than me to try and piece together what these pieces would look like, because I think they would be absolutely astounding. Of course, you never know if they would truly hit what the author of this book was meaning whenever she was describing the artwork, but they're described amazingly. So I really love this book. Obviously, it's a novella, so if you're looking for something that's a little bit quicker, even though it is slow in pace, even though it is a novella, but I think that just adds to the descriptiveness and the beauty of the story. For any of these horror recommendations that I've given, I would definitely recommend checking trigger warnings if you guys want to, because some of them do cover some pretty dark topics. Moving on to my fantasy miscellaneous category that I have for you guys for some lighter reads. And I'll do these in order of my ratings as well. If I can remember, I didn't write down my ratings, so I'm gonna do my best. The first one is The Language of Ghosts, which is by Heather Fawcett. I actually talked about this in my previous video. This is a middle grade. It's a fantasy horror middle grade featuring 3 siblings who are in a world where magic exists, and typically people can only perform one type of magic. And the brother in the sibling trio is a magician who can perform all of the types of magic, which also makes him susceptible to becoming a dark one. And his eldest sister has made it part of her mission in life to make sure that that doesn't happen to him. At the very beginning of the story, you find out that their parents, I can't remember if their parents were murdered or if their parents just died. I think they were murdered. And their crown, because they're royalty, so their crown is taken from them and they escape. All of the children escape, and the boy creates a floating island that is protected by magic to protect his siblings and essentially builds his own kingdom within it. So there is this political squabble that's happening between the people who took over his family's original home and now this magical floating island that this person has. There's also a sea monster that floats around at the island to protect it who loves cake. There are a lot of really dark things going on within the magic as well, especially with the fact that the brother could potentially turn dark. Just some of the things the magic can do are darker than I would have expected for a middle grade, but in the end, it's a story about family and them creating something that they can enjoy together. enjoying life together and, you know, enjoying the small things, which I really loved. I thought this was very sweet, very heartwarming story, and I would definitely recommend. I'm pretty sure I rated Language of Ghosts a 4.25, which is the same rating I gave Cinder House, or did I give Cinder House a 4.5? Either way. Maybe I gave it a 4.5. I recently read Cinder House. It's my most recent read out of all of these, and I really enjoyed it. I didn't expect to enjoy it. I kind of just picked it up on a whim because it was a 6-hour audiobook, and I just needed something quick and snappy that I could fall into because I was in a little bit of a slump, and I was pleasantly surprised. This is a Cinderella retelling, which I knew going in, but I didn't realize that Cinderella is a ghost in this, which is, you know, hence the spooky recommendation, because otherwise this isn't really a scary read by any means. It's not fantasy horror, it's actually fantasy romance. Although I don't really think the romance was necessary in the plot at all. I think it's more interesting what's going on with the world and what happens to Cinderella. The very, very beginning of the story, her stepfather is murdered and she ends up dying in the ramification of that and becomes a ghost that is connected to her home that her stepmother and stepsisters now own. They are the only people who can see Cinderella, and they treat her like a maid, you know, similar to the original story. There's a lot of little intricacies that are very cool that this author has manipulated that would make it so if Cinderella was a ghost, and she does end up finding out she can venture outside her home and meets a fairy. And I just thought the story was lovely, and it had this really nice tie-in with the paranormal, which I always enjoy. Like, I enjoy a paranormal romance, and there is a romance in this. It didn't bother me. It wasn't an overwhelming part of the story. I just don't think it was necessary, and I would have enjoyed the book probably a little bit more had that not been there, because I did just feel like it was a little forced. But otherwise, it was a fun, lighthearted read, a creative take on a classic tale. The next book is one of my favorites from last year. It was either a 4.5 or a 5-star, and that's Foul Days. I really enjoyed this duology. If you haven't heard of Foul Days, it's Foul Days and Monstrous Nights, and it is featuring a town called Chernograd. And our main character is a witch within Chernograd. Chernograd is plagued with monsters 12 days of the year. They have monsters throughout the year, but the 12 days after New Year's, I think it's at the end of the year. I just can't remember if it's after Christmas or after New Year's. I'm pretty sure it's after New Year's. The monsters have more power than they do the rest of the year, and the witches in Chernograd help keep everybody safe. Well, in the very beginning of this story, our main character bets away her powers, and so she is literally powerless in this town right at the moment when they are going into a disaster mode and the monsters are coming, and she is trying to get her powers back. So it's kind of a desperate, you know, on the clock, I need to get my powers back so I can keep myself and people in this town safe. I really liked this. There's actually a monsters guide in the back of it that talks through like all the monsters that you can run into, because they hand out, there's an organization in this book, and they hand out pamphlets to everyone who lives in Chernograd in like what to do if you run into certain monsters and how to get out of the situation. I think it's very fun, and I think that if you're in the mood for something spooky, something kind of witchy, and you want a series but don't want like a giant series, this is very palatable. It's a duology, so you're over into, I think you're gonna have a lot of fun with the characters in this, along with the backstory behind what occurs within the Foul Days and some of the kind of like boss monsters that exist as well. It's very fun. So would highly, highly recommend. This is one I really need to reread. Lastly, the recommendation I have for you guys, the 5-star recommendation I have for you guys for a spooky read that isn't horror, isn't scary, but I do think mixes fantasy and horror really well, is The Dollmakers. It's very mild, so if you are not someone who enjoys horror, I do think that this is something you could still get into. This is the first book in a series of standalones, so there is going to be more, but this is its own encompassing story. So if you would like to get into a fantasy book, but you want to be able to walk away at the end if you want to, you might try this one. I loved this. You are following a character who, for her entire life, has wanted to become a doll maker. In this town that you are in, a kingdom that you're in, there are things called the Shod, who are monsters who come out and they literally kill people in these towns. And the only thing that they have found to prevent the Shod from doing this is the dolls. They have created these warlike dolls that will go out and fight for the civilizations that exist in this kingdom. And the girl in this, the main character whose name I can't remember, but she is someone who has been impacted by a Shod attack earlier in her life, and so she has desired to become a doll maker and has aspired to that her entire life. She ends up learning in the process, very, very early in the book, that she is not meant to be a war doll maker, but she will be able to make artisan dolls. But that's not good enough for her. So she goes on a mission to prove to the people, the powers that be, that she can be someone who creates war dolls or warrior dolls. And she kind of makes a mess of it. She is not a likable character, so if you were going into this expecting like a cinnamon roll or a character to love, it's probably not going to happen, but I do really like her arc and some of the things that she learns along the way, from putting people in danger to get something that she wants, essentially. I really liked it, and I am so excited to continue with this series of standalones because in this book there is such a rich world created. There's a lot of kingdoms surrounding the nation that we're in that I know we're going to expand into, and they sound so interesting, so I can't wait for that as well. There's a lot to love about this story, so I hope you'll give it a try. So those are my 8 spooky recommendations for you guys. I hope you found something that you can enjoy. Let me know if you guys have any recommendations for me, if I'm missing out on any new release or any past book that you think that people aren't talking about anymore and they should be. I would love to hear those in the comments down below. If you want to let me know that you're here but you're not feeling chatty, leave me a little ghost emoji in the comments so I know that you guys are with me. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have a lovely evening, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!